The feeling that you are not alone, that the stranger's hunger is your hunger, that the child playing in the dust outside your door belongs in some profound and unshakable way to you, and you to them. Africa has always known this. For thousands of years, long before the philosophers of Athens ever put quill to parchment, long before Descartes declared, "I think, therefore I am," the peoples of Africa were living by a far older, far deeper truth. Ubuntu ngumuntu gabantu. A person is a person through other people. This is Ubuntu.
Ubuntu. The word itself originates from the Nguni Bantu languages of southern Africa, specifically from the linguistic traditions of the Zulu and Xhosa peoples, two of the most culturally rich civilizations on the continent. It is drawn from the root word untu, meaning person or human being, and the prefix Ubuntu transforms it into something luminous, the quality, the essence, the fullness of what it means to be human. Some 4,000 years ago, most black Africans lived in the regions of West Africa. As they migrated south and east, they carried more than tools and seeds. They carried their entire worldview, their languages, their values, their understanding of what it means to exist alongside another human being. Ubuntu traveled with them, not written on scrolls, not locked in temples, but alive in the proverbs they whispered to children, the songs sung at harvest, the rituals observed at birth, at marriage, at death. This was a philosophy not of the academy, but of life itself, passed mouth to ear, generation to generation, across the Sahel and the Great Rift Valley, down to the Cape, surviving drought, conflict, colonialism, surviving everything the world threw at it, because it was rooted in something undestroyable, the human need to belong.
You have probably heard that Ubuntu means I am because we are, and it does. But reducing Ubuntu to that single phrase is like describing the ocean as some water. The philosophy is vast, it is layered, it is living. Scholars writing in the African Journal of Social Work in 2020 offered what is considered one of the most comprehensive definitions to date: that an authentic individual human being is part of a larger and more significant relational, communal, societal, environmental, and spiritual world. 6 interlocking levels. Think of them as rings expanding outward from the self, like the rings in water when a stone is dropped into a still lake. At the first level, the individual. Ubuntu does not dismiss the individual, it contextualizes them. I am because we are does not mean I am nothing. It means who you are cannot be fully understood in isolation. Your character, your worth, your humanity, these are expressed and confirmed through your relationships. At the second level, family. And in the African tradition, family extends far beyond the nuclear household. It reaches into kinship networks, into tribal lineage, into the extended family of shared ancestry. You do not merely belong to a household, you belong to a people. At the third level, community. Ubuntu calls this ujamaa, a Swahili word meaning familyhood, the act of pulling together, of collective responsibility. This was also the philosophy at the heart of Julius Nyerere's vision for post-independence Tanzania in the 1960s, one of the most ambitious attempts in modern history to build a nation on explicitly African philosophical foundations.
At the fourth level, society. Ubuntu confronts structural reality head-on. The questions of liberation, justice, decolonization, compensation, forgiveness. It is not a passive philosophy. It demands active, transformational engagement with the social order. At the fifth level, environment. Ubuntu recognizes what modern ecology is only beginning to quantify, that human beings are not separate from nature. We are woven into it. The land, the soil, the animals, the vegetation.
These are not resources to be exploited. They are relatives to be respected. And this leads to a powerful concept within Ubuntu philosophy called the principle of co-agency, the recognition that we are co-creators of the world we inhabit. Consider that 30% of all food crops on Earth depend on cross-pollination from bees. If we destroy the bees, we destroy ourselves. Ubuntu knew this, not in scientific terms, but in moral and spiritual terms, long before the data was gathered. At the sixth and deepest level, spirituality. Ubuntu is not a religion, but it is spiritual. It holds that the living, the dead, and the unborn are bound together, that our ancestors are present, that our choices echo into futures we will never see. All things are connected. Everything is one. This is Ubuntu. Not a slogan, not a hashtag, a complete cosmology, a total way of being alive in the world, in relationship to everything that is.
One of the most intellectually challenging questions in all of philosophy is deceptively simple. Who are you? Not your name, not your job, not your nationality. You. What makes you the same person you were 10 years ago? What makes you, you? Western philosophy has given us three classic answers. The psychological view, you are your memories, your thoughts, your continuity of mind. The somatic view, you are your body. The narrative view, you are the story you tell yourself about yourself. Ubuntu offers a fourth answer, a relational view. Your identity does not live entirely inside you. It is also held and shaped by those around you. You are who your community knows you to be, in dynamic conversation with who you know yourself to be. Your identity exists in the space between those two truths. Imagine someone who undergoes a sudden and radical change, who once laughed and played with their loved ones, but who now lashes out with anger and cruelty. From a purely psychological view, they retain the same memories. From a somatic view, the same body. From a narrative view, they may still tell a consistent story of themselves internally. But their family, their friends, their community, they see a different person. And Ubuntu says that external perception matters. Your identity is not simply what you alone declare it to be. It is partly constituted by how you move through your relationships, by how you show up for, or fail, the people around you. There is something both humbling and liberating in this. Humbling because you cannot simply define yourself in isolation and demand the world accept it. Liberating because it means your humanity is confirmed and renewed every day in the warmth of connection. Here is a question economists have wrestled with for decades. Would you rather earn $25,000 a year in a world where everyone else earns $24,000, or earn $240,000 a year in a world where everyone else earns $250,000? Standard economic theory says the answer is obvious. Take the larger income. Rational self-interest dictates that absolute gain always wins. And yet, study after study confirms that the majority of people choose the first option, the smaller number, the one that places them above their peers, even at great personal financial cost. Economists tend to label this irrational. Ubuntu philosophy says, perhaps it is the economists who have misunderstood rationality. If your sense of self, your well-being, your confidence, your dignity is not simply a measure of what you have, but is relationally defined by what those around you have, then the choice begins to make perfect sense. Ubuntu suggests that our relationships are not just emotionally meaningful, they are constitutive of who we are. They are not accessories to the self, they are part of the self. And if that is true, then truly self-interested behaviour must include caring about the conditions of those around you. You cannot be fully yourself in a community of suffering. You cannot be fully human in a society of broken relationships.
Ubuntu argues that the deepest form of self-interest is communal investment, and that the sharpest rational choice is one made with your whole humanity, not just your wallet.
For 46 years, from 1948 to 1994, South Africa was a nation held hostage by one of the most systematized regimes of racial oppression the modern world had ever seen. Apartheid, the Afrikaans word for apartness, did not merely separate races, it attempted to legislate the very humanity out of an entire people. It said, "You do not count. You do not belong. You are less than human." And then it ended. And South Africa faced a question that no philosophy textbook had ever had to answer in quite this way. What do you do the morning after? The world expected rage. History had always delivered rage. The French Revolution delivered rage. The Haitian Revolution delivered rage. Every liberation movement in recorded history, when finally victorious, had turned to the oppressor and said, "Now you will suffer as we suffered." And perhaps no one would have blamed South Africa for doing the same. But Nelson Mandela, who had spent 27 years in the brutal conditions of Robben Island prison, years that would have broken most human beings, Nelson Mandela emerged speaking of forgiveness, of reconciliation, of Ubuntu. He said, "I knew as well as I knew anything that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred, locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. The oppressor and the oppressed alike are robbed of their humanity."
This was Ubuntu spoken at the highest level of statecraft the world had ever seen. In 1995, South Africa established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC, chaired by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. It was unlike any judicial process in history. Its purpose was not punishment, its purpose was truth, and through truth, healing. Perpetrators of apartheid-era atrocities came before the commission. Victims sat across from those who had tortured them, burned their homes, murdered their children, and the process, agonizing, imperfect, achingly human, invited both to speak, to be heard, to be seen. Archbishop Tutu framed it with this Ubuntu logic. Those who harbor hatred and endorse oppression become less human by doing so. They do not need to be punished, they need to be restored. Retribution, Tutu argued, would only continue the cycle, diminishing the humanity of those who exact it, just as oppression had diminished those who wielded it. He pointed to Rwanda, to the long history of tension between Hutu and Tutsi peoples, a tension inflamed and exploited by Belgian colonial authorities who had hardened fluid social categories into rigid racial identities. When the Hutus eventually came to power, the cycle of revenge exploded into genocide in 1994, claiming an estimated 800,000 lives in 100 days. Tutu saw in this the terrible cost of Ubuntu's absence, the cost of a world that does not understand that your humanity is tied to the humanity of everyone around you. Restorative justice, not retributive justice. This is Ubuntu's most radical and most essential gift to political philosophy. It says the point of justice is not to make the guilty suffer. The point of justice is to make the broken whole. Critics will argue, and they are not entirely wrong, that without the deterrent of punishment, wrongdoers face no consequence that prevents future harm. The world of nation-states and individual criminal law requires that deterrent. Ubuntu does not dismiss this, but it argues that when entire cultures are steeped in cycles of oppression and revenge, no deterrent can break that cycle. Only healing can. Only the radical act
of seeing the humanity in the person who tried to erase yours.
Today, Ubuntu is more than a philosophy. It is a movement. It is being woven into education theory, Ubuntu pedagogy, which reimagines learning as a communal act rather than an individual competition. It is informing social work practice, legal philosophy, and environmental ethics. It is being taught in universities from Johannesburg to Tokyo to New York. And yet, Ubuntu's full power remains underutilized. Western philosophical traditions still dominate global academic discourse. The oral literature in which Ubuntu lives, the proverbs, the praise poetry, the songs, the rituals, has not yet been fully translated into the written forms that institutions demand. That work is urgent. That work is necessary. Here is what Ubuntu asks of us in the end. It asks us to look at the person beside us, any person, every person, and recognize that we are not separate, that their hunger diminishes us, that their joy enlarges us, that we are, all of us, held within something larger than ourselves, something woven from relationship, from memory, from responsibility, from love. You are because we are. I am because you are. We are because we choose to be together. A person is a person through other people. If you enjoyed watching this video and want other African history lovers to find the channel, do not forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe, and share.